Hello, friends. I've been sick all week, and I'm still kind of sick. So if my voice sounds weird or if I seem off, that is why. That will be my excuse. So I had different videos planned here for various reasons. I'm pushing them back. Like, I can't do my Angel Fire video right now. That just got behind schedule, and same with my All for the Game video. Those are going to be pushed into either January or February. However, something interesting did catch my attention just a couple weeks ago, and I figured, you know what, let's talk about that. So Veronica Roth, the author of the Divergent books, spoke at New York Comic Con 2025, and she said that the ending of those books was always the plan. Now, for those unfamiliar, the ending of Divergent, by the way, this video is going to be chock full of spoilers, so if that bothers you, goodbye, I guess.
I don't know, man. I was banging 7-gram rocks and finishing them because that's how I roll. I have one speed, I have one gear. Go!
But the ending of Divergent, back when the books first came out, was controversial, let's say. Now, I didn't read the books until a year or two after that, so all I knew was, like, people were upset, both online and in person when I spoke to people. They were upset about it, and then I read them myself later, and I also didn't like the ending that much, but I didn't hate it as much as everyone else seemed to, but at the same time I seemed to dislike the books more strongly, the books as a whole more strongly than they did. But that said, hearing the author talk about it, and then seeing some discussion about her comments online, did make me reconsider some of my opinions, and I've just gone back over Divergent and some of the things I've thought and said about it over the years, and I've rethought a few things.
Why? Why?
Now, just to be clear, I still dislike Divergent, okay? My most viewed video is talking about the world building of Divergent and how it's terrible and doesn't make sense. You can go watch that right now if you don't believe that I dislike these books. But again, over time, I've had to reconsider some things. That's for a couple of reasons, partially just due to recency bias, right? Like, the hate fades over time. Like, I definitely would not put Allegiant in my top 10 worst books anymore. But the hate fades over time. And also, I've just read so much crap in the past couple of years, and I look at what modern authors are putting out, and I'm like, you know, maybe I was a little harsh on stuff like Divergent back in the day, you know? Like, maybe it wasn't that bad.
You need to leave!
So in this video, I want to talk about not only the ending of Divergent and how I think that it's really not that bad, but how I also have softened on some of the rest of the books over time. And before I get into that, I just want to go over a few things. Number one, Divergent, yes, it is clearly cashing in on the Hunger Games craze. Like, it came out at the height of that craze. Actually, it came out pretty early on in the height of the craze, but whatever. It's about a dystopian world. There's a teen girl who is an action protagonist. There's an obnoxious love story that would probably have been fine if it just took up less screen time, but it kind of got in the way of things. There's a vague theme of rebellion against society. You know, like, it was definitely cashing in on the Hunger Games craze, but as we're gonna go into in this video, it's not a straight-up ripoff, guys. Like, it does quite a bit different. Like, if you're gonna claim that Divergent is a ripoff of Hunger Games, then you either haven't read both of those, or you just blatantly don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of like all the people who love saying that The Hunger Games is a ripoff of Battle Royale. Like, recently Quentin Tarantino said that, and a lot of people were giving him pushback on that, so I think people are starting to open up to the thing I said in a video 2 years ago, where yeah, they have kind of a similar setup, but the actual stories themselves are a lot different. Because if Suzanne Collins ripped off Battle Royale when she just put people in a death game, then, well, that means Battle Royale was ripping off The Running Man, because that came out earlier, and The Running Man was ripping off The Most Dangerous Game, which came out decades before that. You know, like, these are very basic ideas, and they all go in very different directions.
I've connected the two dots.
You didn't connect shit, but
I've connected them.
Anyways, I was just taking a moment to shit on Quentin Tarantino. Like, I don't think Divergent is good, but it is better than a lot of stuff I've read, especially recently. So here's a short summary of the series, because a lot of you either haven't read it, or you read it, but you read it like 12 years ago, so you could use a refresher. So it takes place in Chicago after some sort of vague post-apocalypse. There's some sort of thing destroyed, a bunch of stuff, and now Chicago is largely in ruins, but there are parts of it that have been rebuilt. And that is actually one thing I liked in both the books and the movies, is that Chicago's a really big city, and so, yes, they have rebuilt parts of it, and they live in parts of it, but there are still big parts that are abandoned, crumbling ruins. I thought that was kind of cool. And society here is divided into 5 factions, which are all based on one single personality trait. Like, there's one for honesty, bravery, kindness, selflessness, and smart people. There we go. That was the last one. Like I said, I'm sick. The main character, whose name is Beatrice, but she later just shortens it to Triss, somehow tests for all 5, because before they decide what faction they want to belong to, they take a test to see which one they are most associated with. And yes, there were a lot of these online in the early 2010s that you could take as well. But by testing for all 5, she was known as a Divergent, which is supposed to be impossible, but she's also told just, hey, keep that a secret because people will come after you if they find out that you're a Divergent. So she decides that because she can join whatever faction she wants and fits in, she joins the Brave faction, known as Dauntless, and she spends most of the first book training as a soldier. Like, it goes on for a while. That's the bulk of this book. But then the bad guys, at the end, they do a coup, and they actually kill both of her parents. And then that's basically the end of book 1. Like, she helps stop the coup from getting as bad as it could be, but they are still in control of the government by the end. And then book 2, they fight a war. There's some betrayals and some back and forth, but in the end they do defeat the villain, and at the end they learn about the outside world. They learn that there's actually people out there beyond Chicago. And then we go to book 3, which is called Allegiant. Now, the heroes actually are the new government, and there are some rebels fighting to bring back the old regime and the old faction system. But they're less important because outside of Chicago, there are bad guys, and it turns out that the entire city was some giant genetic experiment. Yeah, there's a big twist about how people were quote-unquote genetically damaged so that they could only have one personality trait each, and Divergents are literally just normal people, which is about as dumb as it sounds.
What the hell is that?
So the new main bad guy, who I believe was played by Jeff Daniels in the movie, actually. You know, the movie where they only adapted half of the first book because they got greedy and thought they could split it into 2, and then no one watched the 3rd movie, so they just never made the 4th one. But anyways, the new bad guy actually wants to erase the memories of everybody in Chicago in order to preserve the experiment or whatever. It doesn't actually make a lot of sense, but hey, there is at least a bad guy doing bad things. And then Triss does manage to stop him and stop his evil plans, but she dies in the process. And then there's an epilogue. It's a couple of years later, and not only Triss's boyfriend, but all her other friends and everyone have moved on, and they scatter her ashes, and they're like, okay, we're moving on and fixing the world. Now, like I said, I would no longer put the 3rd book, Allegiant, on my worst books ever list. Like, I still think it's bad, because, again, you can't put in a twist about how the main character is super special because she's literally just a normal person and expect me to take it seriously. Like, you can't do things like that. That was just too stupid. I would no longer put it on my worst books list, but it's still bad. The first 2 books, Divergent and Insurgent, I think are fine. You know, like, they're fine. They have a lot of cliches in there, obviously, and most of the cliches aren't done that well. But at the same time, it does follow very basic foundational storytelling stuff that a lot of other books just don't do. For example, Triss has an actual personality. You know, she's a character, she's a person who acts in such a way where I don't always agree with what she's doing, but at least it makes sense from her perspective, and I understand why she's doing it, you know? And I also like that she's not an action hero from the start, the way Katniss Everdeen was. Because, yeah, Katniss Everdeen, her backstory did justify why she could do all the things she did. It justified why she was a good archer and a good hunter, and why she could move through the woods very well, and that helped her survive in the Hunger Games. Like, that made sense, don't get me wrong. But Triss's backstory didn't have that, so it actually shows her training, and she grows and gets a lot better as a soldier, and then once the actual conflict starts, she's better positioned to play a role in it. She's not just an action hero because the story demands it, she had to work for it, and I do like that. Nowadays, the authors would have to throw in something about how, oh, if you're Divergent, you also have psychic powers, so she's super special and can do all sorts of stuff, but she never actually does any of that stuff. They would just have her boyfriend do everything for her. Like, he would go in and change her scores or something after her tests that she takes so that she gets into Dauntless even though she's not qualified. Like, modern books would definitely fucking do that. Do not pretend they wouldn't do something like that, guys.
Are we the baddies?
Also, modern books like, let's bring up Fourth Wing, but also Silver Elite, I read more recently. They kind of just have nothing but training because the authors just want to tell like a school or an academy story for some reason. Like, even in Fourth Wing, that one near the climax, main character girl like crossed the Rubicon. You know, she was in open rebellion against the government now, but in the second book she's just back at school, right? Like, in Divergent, they don't do that. The bulk of the first book is taken up by training, yeah, but then once the war starts, that's what the story is about. You know, she doesn't go back to school in the second book. So I like that they don't do that. Divergent also has a plot, you know, with events that lead into one another. It's not just, this happens, and then this other totally unrelated thing happens, and then these two people start fucking, and I'm supposed to care about it because I guess they're both described as hot, but that dude's an asshole, or, you know, just, and then just, that's how a lot of these types of books are written nowadays, right? Like, just events happen, but they don't lead into one another in any way. There's no actual plot. In Divergent, Triss starts off feeling kind of out of place in her faction. She's in the Selfless one, but she feels like she doesn't really have anywhere else to go, but then she tests as a Divergent, and she's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna take a risk, and I'm gonna join Dauntless instead, the Brave faction, and then she does it, and then she goes through training, and she has a lot of difficulty, but that leads her to being in a better position when the coup happens, and she's in a better position to help stop the bad guys from fully wiping out the other factions there, because that was kind of a thing. The bad guys were basically doing ethnic cleansing there. And then, again, because Triss is a soldier, she's in a position to actually, like, be partaking in the war that is in the second book, and, you know, she is an insurgent. That's what that word means. And then, you know, like, just events lead into one another. They don't just happen. And I liked that about the books as well. There are a lot of twists in the story as well, and the twists aren't just there for the sake of having twists or for the sake of going, oh, well, now you two have no choice but to be married and have a lot of sex all the time, or whatever the fuck these fairy porn people keep shoving in front of my eyeballs. Like, the twists are there, but they actually raise the stakes of the story. They aren't always great twists, and they don't always make perfect sense, but they raise the stakes. You know, like when Triss's brother betrays them on multiple occasions, that's a twist that raises the stakes. Or when they find out that the bad guys are doing a coup, that's a twist that raises the stakes. Or when they find out that there's a whole world outside of Chicago. Like, it's raising the stakes every time, and so the story actually feels like it's getting bigger, and like the situations the characters are in are getting more dangerous. The world building is dumb. Again, I have my most viewed video is all about that, but at least it's there. You know, there's effort involved. The author attempted to explain like the government of this world and how it wound up the way it wound up, and just how normal people live, and when the system comes crashing down, there are people who want to bring it back, but then there are people who suffered under the old system who will do basically anything to make sure that this newer, imperfect one stays in place. Like, you know, there's effort involved there, it just didn't always make sense. And like I said earlier, while it is similar to the Hunger Games, it's not a full ripoff. It does some different stuff, and compare that to modern romantasy stuff where it is literally just the exact same shit over and over and over again. It is very refreshing just to look back on things like Divergent, or even lots of other crappy young adult dystopian clones, and I can think to myself, like, yeah, these weren't always great, but at least they were a little different from one another. Like, you know, and in Divergent, it's different from the Hunger Games in that Triss needs to train at the beginning, like I said. She actually does lose her family. Like, both of her parents are killed at the end of the first book. And her brother, he's still alive by the end, but he keeps betraying her over and over again, and people still keep letting him hang around for some reason.
People betray me, and I keep forgiving them.
So while Triss does love her brother, yes, she also has kind of a contentious relationship with him, which is very realistic. You know, I have 5 siblings myself. Like, sometimes that's just what it's like. Whereas, I'm not saying the relationship between Katniss and her sister was bad necessarily, but it's also very simple and straightforward. Like, yeah, Katniss loves and wants to protect her younger sister. So, you know, like, it's just a little bit deeper in Divergent, is all I'm saying. And also, there is no love triangle here. Yeah, it's not that there's a love triangle, but it doesn't take up that much time, or it's really half-assed or something, which I can say for a lot of these crappy young adult dystopias that were aping the Hunger Games, but, like, Divergent straight up doesn't have one. Like, it's just Triss falls in love with her boyfriend, his name is 4, by the way, like the number. Like, we find out later his real name is Tobias, and he changed his name to 4 because there's only 4 things he's afraid of, which is stupid, but admittedly, he chose a new name when he was 16 years old, and that does seem like the kind of fake deep shit that a 16-year-old boy would do to name himself, so I can't say it's unrealistic. And on top of that, unlike not only a lot of young adult dystopian clones that are ripping off the Hunger Games, but also unlike a lot of the shitty fantasy that came afterwards, and unlike a lot of the shitty romantasy that is still dominating all of our fucking bookshelves these days, Divergent isn't really a story about a rebellion against an evil government. Like, again, at the first book, at the beginning of the first book, the government is largely fine. Like, it's not perfect, obviously, but everyone seems fine with it. The bad guys are the ones who do a violent coup and overthrow the government, and then kind of sort of become the new one after that. And then later, the heroes, again, take over and form a new government in the final book, and the bad guys are rebels against it. So, like, I've had people in my comments over the years say things like, oh man, I want someone to write a book like this, but, like, the main character girl is fighting on behalf of the government and fighting against the rebels. I'm like, people, literally, Divergence, that's literally the biggest of these ripoffs, or I shouldn't say ripoffs, but the biggest of these Hunger Games clones that came out, and that's what it's about. Like, that's what's happening here. There's also the early mystery about the outside world. Like, it's pretty clear from the audience's perspective that there's something going on outside Chicago, but we don't know exactly what. And sure, the twists about it are kind of stupid, but, like, they're there. The Hunger Games didn't have anything like that. And also, the protagonist dies at the end. You know, that's not something that is at all common in this genre. So, while Divergent is definitely aping on the success of the Hunger Games, and it does copy a lot of stuff there, it does its own thing with them. You know, it's like using the same ingredients to make a different recipe, I think would be a good way of looking at it. Like, I'm not saying Divergent is great, because I don't think it is, but, like, it's different, at least. Now, that does bring me to the ending. Triss dies at the end, and look, before I say anything else, I want to say that is a ballsy move. Like I said, it was unexpected, and that's very rare in this type of genre. That's rare in most genres, really. But it's also just a ballsy move. Like, you can look and see how many people got upset about the ending, and again, I kind of agree with them. I don't think it's good, but it was ballsy. It was brave to go that route. And story-wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Triss to sacrifice herself there. Like, there were definitely better plans that they could have put in place. Like, the story was kind of set up in such a way where it was basically going, no, Triss is going to sacrifice herself now. And, like, it just wasn't justified that much. And I think that's a big part of why people were upset. However, thematically, it does work, because Triss and all Divergents are, again, they're literally just normal people, right? Like, the other people in the series were just genetically cursed to only have one personality trait each. However, by being a normal person, Divergents have the capacity to be brave, and to be smart, and to be selfless, and to be honest, and, you know, all those other things. We all have the capacity to do that. And throughout the series, we see Triss be brave plenty of times. We see her be smart once or twice. We see her be kind occasionally. and we see her be honest, sure, but I don't think she's really selfless until the end. Like, she sacrifices herself to save tons of other people. On top of that, she kind of seems to have lost the will to live after her parents died. Like, she's constantly throwing herself into situations where she's in serious danger and she's getting shot at without really thinking or planning things through. And it seems like part of that is because she just doesn't really care if she lives or dies anymore. But at the same time, her parents did sacrifice themselves to save her. Like, they sacrificed themselves to make sure she could keep living, and now she, at the end of the series, is being truly selfless the way they were, and she's, like, living up to their example, and now she understands exactly what it is she did for them. And so, like, thematically, yeah, this ending does work. It's just practically, it needed some work, is all I'm saying. Now, some people have said that Divergent is Christian fiction, and that the hero martyring themselves is proof of that, and no, I'm not sure where they're getting that. Like, it's only Christian fiction if it's a Jesus allegory where she is resurrected and comes back at the end. Cough, 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 cough. Wow, sorry, something's caught in my throat there. So, long story short, plot-wise, the ending is kind of nonsensical, but thematically, it does work. Like, you can't get too mad at Veronica Roth for sticking to a theme and sticking to an idea and going through with it to the end. Like, you can be upset with her for not writing it better, but you can't be mad at her for the general idea. So I guess I'll just end this video by saying Divergent is not great. I don't even think it's good, really. But simply by being a story that has themes and that has a comprehensible plot and having a genuine ending, it's a flawed ending, but it is genuine. That was the author's vision that she wanted to do. And by having characters that aren't just preloaded archetypes, it is a lot better than a lot of other crap coming out today that's aimed at more or less the same audience. You know, Divergent is flawed, but by being flawed, it is very, very human. And I don't know, I don't have a lot else to say there, but please subscribe and stuff. Goodbye. Hello, thanks to everyone who watched all the way to the end of the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Do you see all these names here? These are my patrons. These are the guys that send me money over on Patreon. If you want to get your name here, you can give me $5 or more a month. I really appreciate it. You can also become a YouTube channel member. That gives you the same benefits, like having early access to videos and stuff. You just don't get your name on here. Huge thanks to my $10 and up patrons, 3-Day Cat, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Brother Santodes, Carolina Clay, Lexi Delorme, Lord Tiebreaker, Michael and Katie Hake, Mr. A5013, Proscriptions of Zhuojiang, Psych XS, Slumbering Jellyfish, Observing Outer Space, Tesla Shark, Toa Michael, Vevictus, and Wesley. I wouldn't be able to do this without all of these people here, as well as all the rest of you. If you can't support me that way, then again, liking the video, commenting on it, sharing it around, subscribing to my channel if you haven't, or just having a lovely day. I guess that helps too. See you around. Goodbye.